Hello, everyone, and welcome. Today we're doing a special live stream. We're going to be doing what I call a masterclass session. Now, normally these would be on a Monday, but yesterday was a holiday in the States, so here we are. Now, masterclasses are intended for power users who have one of two things here. One, they have pro access, and they already have somewhat knowledge of the tool. So if you're a power user, these are the kind of streams for you. Hey, Calipania. Hello, Nimaway. Awesome. So many awesome faces here already. That's great. So again, these are meant for power users, those of you who want to use the tool outside of the box. Okay, so this is not for those of you who are just beginning, but we're going to be covering medieval maps. Now, when I say medieval maps, this is kind of a broad statement. There's quite a variety of different art styles. It depends on the artist at the time and their skill, their ability. So this is kind of a general term when I say that. So what we'll be doing is kind of mimicking medieval maps, and we're going to be using mostly the fantasy world style, but we'll obviously include some fantasy regional stuff because there's a scale differential that kind of comes into play when you're trying to make a map like this. So if you're kind of curious what we're making, you'll see here on the screen, this is what we are going to be kind of creating. Might be a little different than what you see here, okay? All right, so again, just remember, moving forward, masterclasses will be on Mondays. All right, and I think we're only doing 2 a month right now. We might include more, include other stuff as well, so I'm excited about that. All right, so kind of suck in this map a little bit, take a look at it, and kind of just get an idea of what we're going to be working on, and then we'll just kind of jump right in. All right. So for the aspect ratio here, I just use your common square. I'm not using the portrait or landscape, using square, but it doesn't really matter which aspect ratio you use. It just depends on what you like most. So we're just going to use the square here. And what I'll normally do is I'll turn on a grid, and it's not set to the default, which is 40 by 40. I'm going to actually cut that in half and just make it 20 by 20. And the grid is going to be useful to me because I'm going to be using it as a guide, and eventually we'll turn it off. And so what we're going to do is create what's called the neat line. A neat line is where all the art, all the content gets cut off, and that creates a little frame. And that way it kind of frames in the content of the map. And so what you'll do is you'll use the shape tool. I'm going to use a black line for stroke, and the fill can be whatever texture you want it to be. It's up to you. Make sure that you have the grid on, you have snap to grid on, and we're going to fill the entire screen up. I have it set to subtract, but we'll go to add mode here. Fill up the whole screen, and then just switch to the subtract mode. And then now you have this nice neat line. Now why that's helpful is because if you're going to be using Fantasy Regional for stamps in the front, one thing you'll notice is that they have these shadows, and you want to be able to cut off anything that gets over the neat line. So that's why we're creating this neat line here, because a lot of stamps are going to overlap and they might go over the shadows. So I set this at a certain layer. I have it set to layer 4. So just make sure that most of your stamps are set to layer 3 and below. And sometimes you want stamps to overlap the neat line just to kind of create this nice aesthetic, because everything else will be cut off by the neat line. But there might be some stamps, like maybe a character or whatever, that's going to have that overlapping the neat line, and that can look really interesting. So just remember, neat line layer +4 and everything else below that, unless you want it to be covering the neat line. Now we are going to be using Fantasy Regional for stamps that are up closer, because we're going to be using a little bit of perspective in this. And the way that I set this up is I usually use the grid as a guide. I'm going to use the line, and I'm going to create some lines that are going to act as guides for where the foreground, the middle ground, and the background are. So I'm going to go ahead and put this up here. Now this piece right here is going to be your foreground. Stamps that are going to be in this area right here are going to be much larger. So you're probably going to want to use Fantasy Regional stamps because they're much bigger. If you were to scale up Fantasy World stamps too big, then they look a little cartoony and it doesn't match with the art. So your Fantasy World stamps will be more in the middle and in the background layer. So up front, large stamps, Fantasy Regional. And then here will be medium size, and that can vary. You might have something bigger here, and then it gets smaller, and smaller and smaller as you go. And in the background, items are going to be extra small. So just, this is what we mean by perspective. We're going to force the user to make it look like we have perspective by changing the scale. The closer or the further down we go, stamps are going to get bigger. The further back or up we go towards the background, the stamps are going to get smaller. So pretty simple stuff. And now you don't have to use these lines. Once you start making a lot of these kind of maps, then you start getting an eyeball for things. So the more and more you make maps like this, the less and less you'll have to use the grid and these kind of guidelines. But this is a good start for it. So I'll leave them here for now. I'm just going to lock them into place. And then when they kind of get in the way, and they will eventually, I'll end up changing that. So now once we've done that, the next step is to make the landscape. Now, when it comes to terrain or a biome, I generally stick with one biome because this is going to be a regional style map. And what I'll end up doing is we start with terrain first, right? And then you build everything on top of that, right? It would be weird to start placing trees before you started placing hills, right? Or if you started placing buildings without placing land to put them on. So it's always good to put with terrain, biomes, and that stuff first before you start putting down stamps. Kind of a no-brainer there. So what we'll want to do is we're going to want to create the illusion of rolling hills without having to use a bunch of these hill stamps. And what we'll do is we'll go over to the line tool and we're going to edit some stamps. So what I've done is I've created what's called this hill stamp right here. Let me go into the catalog here and I'll show you where it is. Make sure it's set to Fantasy World. And there's this stamp right here called a ridge. And then what you do with the ridge is you're going to end up changing the hue. And I changed the hue to green. That's going to be your rolling hills. I'm also going to have some water, an ocean in the background. It'll be a nice contrast. It's a great artistic kind of contrast to have water and land when they come together. And so that always looks nice. So in the background, we're going to create a scene where there's going to be the ocean and then maybe an island in the far distance. So, and I've changed the hue of this stamp to be blue so that it will match with the blue that I'm going to use for the ocean. I hope that makes sense. So we'll go ahead and undo that. We'll get the general idea. Okay, so now that you have that step's done. So let's go ahead and do, like I said, we're going to use this tool. We're going to set the stroke to be really big because I'm going to start in the foreground and then move backwards. So we'll start with this first, and I'm going to make sure that it's on layer negative or positive 3, because that way it's behind the neat line. Notice that if I put it above, it's going to go over. So layer 3. And then what I'll do is I'll start by just creating some rolling hills like this. And you want to make sure that the line work is facing up, so you'll have to flip like this. You can see here, this is going to be the start of our hills. So we'll start with the terrain first. Let's go ahead and create another hill. Let's put emphasis on maybe on one side. And sometimes you can go in and just like stop a hill right there like that. And if you don't like that, you can just undo it. Do it again. Maybe I just want to have some rolling hills on this side, but don't actually connect to the other side. There, make sure that you flip, of course. Let's put in another one right here like this, going a little further across. And of course, what's really nice about using the line tool is that you can rotate them, move them around. So I can push this over to here or push it over to here, whichever works best. I think right there looks good. Let's move this over a little bit, over to here. That's good. And let's go put in one more. Let's put one here. There we go. Make it nice and hilly. And we'll have to flip it. There we go. All right, so there's that. And then what I'll do is I'll change the scale. So remember, stamps that are bigger or closer to you are going to be bigger. So I'll go ahead and change all of these stamps and we'll go down. Let's say let's do 435. Let's take the next two in the back. We'll go down even more, make them even smaller. And then we'll take this one and make it even smaller. Okay. All right, let's go ahead and move this around a little bit. Okay. And we'll move this down a little bit here. I think that'll work good. This one's a bit bigger, so we'll leave that there. Okay. And we can always move things around if we need to. Roads are not premium. You can just use a texture for that. And there's tons of free textures that you can work with. Okay, so now that I've put that together, I don't really need my neat line or my lines anymore. So I can just go ahead and delete these lines. I already have a general idea of scale already. You see that they get bigger and smaller as I go. And so then now I can go in and I can paint in the water. So everything above this last ridge right here is going to be water. And what I'll do is I'll turn the softness off. And don't worry about making it perfect for now, but just do the edges a little bit because this is all in the same layer. We'll go up here. Oopsie, undo that. My mistake. There we go. And I'll just go over it quickly. We can end up editing it as we go. I'll quickly just go on the edges here. Again, if you overlap a little bit, don't worry about that. That's okay. We'll end up fixing that later. It's always good to not be too perfectionist about it right away because that will kind of stifle progress. It's kind of a big pro tip there. Don't worry about making things perfect, particularly in the beginning of the map making process, because it's going to discourage you and you don't want to do that, right? So don't worry about making things perfect. Just kind of get the general volume of the area filled with that blue texture, and then you can go back in like I'm doing here. This brush is a little big, so it kind of bleeds over a little bit, and that's okay. Let's see here. I see a spot right here. There we go. I see I missed a spot right there. Great. Okay. So now that I've done that, I can start working on the next part, which is the water part. And I'm just going to take the line, and whenever you edit a stamp like this, these ridges right here, I usually favorite it. So now that I have that blue, I can use this for water, and I'll bring the scale down quite a bit. Let's go with right about there. I think that looks good. And then I'll start creating waves of water. And in the same way that I kind of did the hills, right? So what these represent is like waves. We'll create a couple here, and we'll create one more. That's a little too much. Let's make sure doesn't have so much. We'll make it a little bit straighter because it's going to be the horizon. There we go. And we'll make that just a little bit smaller. There we go. Make this one. Oh, I don't really like the way that I did that, so we'll redo that one. Yeah, that works fine. Okay, I'm going to have to push it down a layer so that it's below. Let's see here. I'm going to maneuver this up. There we go. Okay. All right, I think we can now turn the grid off. And if you can kind of actually look at it now without the grid there. And so now I can kind of edit things as I need to. You can add more hills as you go. It's up to you. I can kind of move things around here. I think for now that looks okay. Let's go ahead and save. We're at 101 changes. And what we'll do next is we're going to make the road, just like our first time chatter Tequila Sunset over here mentioned road. So let's go ahead and do that. And what I normally do, and I see this in a lot of medieval maps, is that they'll have a road that starts in the foreground and then kind of snakes through the middle ground area and then leads somewhere in the background. And this is going to create like our centerpiece. This is like where the main centerpiece, whether it's a castle, a ruin, whatever you want it to be. It could be a forest with a tower in it. It doesn't matter. It's up to you to decide what you really want the focal point to be. And the road is nice because the road is something that the user's eyes will follow through the map as it leads to the central point. So kind of an art pro tip there, creating a way for the eye to travel through the map. That's the beautiful part of being an artist, right? Is that you can control where the user's eye or the viewer's eye is going. So let's create a road. For now, I'm just going to use a path for it, but we're going to end up using texture. And in the very front, I want some players or some characters to be on the side somewhere to act as kind of embellishment and art. So right here, the road will go this way. And then what we'll do is we're going to have it snake kind of through, and then we'll end up with something right here. Okay, so now I'm going to leave that path there. It's just a guide to let me know where the road is. And now that we have a road, we can now determine what things are going to be around it. Because you'd be like, well, maybe I want the forest to be on the right side of the road here, and I want a little village to be on the left side here. So that road there is going to help to kind of decide where things are going to go. Now, one thing I also want to mention is that you want to show that there's perspective, the road wouldn't be truly like this. It would change up a little bit. So what I'll do here is just start with the main part here, and then it goes to here. Now, if you wanted to show that there's a drop, a hill, then you would change the line a little to the left or to the right. Same thing here. I want to show that the path drops down a little bit. Same thing here. There's a little bit of a drop here on the road. And then you can go leading up to the thing there. So this is what's going to create this illusion of elevation, that there's a drop, and that's why the road is off to the left or to the right a little more. So kind of a nice little trick there. Now that you have the road, or at least the guide for the road, we can pick a centerpiece. So we'll go into Fantasy World. We're here already. And it's up to you whether you want to use a flat stamp like this. There's a flat stamp like that. Or if you want to use a more isometric type stamp. And that is personal preference, because I have noticed that in a lot of medieval maps, there's kind of a mix between flat and isometric stamps. It really just depends on the skill level of the artist. So if you want more continuity, then you could just choose only flat or isometric. But I feel, to be generous towards a lot of medieval maps that I've seen, is that you can combine the two. It's okay if you have both, but I do think you should be just strategic about it. Now, for the centerpiece, I'm not going to go with isometric. I'm going to end up going with just kind of this flat piece here. And remember where this stamp is. It's a little further in the background, so it would be a lot smaller. So let's maybe put the centerpiece down, and then this will kind of help set the scale for other stamps that are going to be in that area next to that. So I could maybe choose a city or a castle. So there's some cities here. Let's go ahead and just expand all assets, and we'll kind of choose which one we want here. If anyone has ideas, you can choose, but I think the elves work great. It depends on the theme of it. Since we're doing medieval, we won't use maybe some fantasy races. Let's end up using maybe just human stuff. So let's go out of here. I'm going to expand all assets. And we're going to scroll down and just kind of look for a good stamp that's going to work for a city. So we'll take a good look here. We'll scroll through. I think I saw quite a few ones in here. You got all this stuff. That's nice. I love that stuff. Here we go. I'm seeing some castles right here, but these are isometric. So let's maybe stick with, here we go. There's a human castle here. I kind of like this one. I think this fortress is nice. Let's use this one right here. I think this castle looks quite nice. And we're going to scale it down quite a bit. Remember, it's in the background, so it's going to be quite a bit smaller. So we're going to scale it up. Okay. Now I'm going to go ahead and just move this up a little bit. I want to position it. I'm going to turn snap to grid off. It's kind of just hindering the kind of pixel precision that I kind of want here. And this looks kind of nice because the castle overlaps the waves in the background, kind of creating a lot of more overlap. And I think that castle will stick out a lot more because of that. And we can bring this down even smaller. I see it's at 200. Let's bring it at 180. Okay. Now we have a centerpiece. Now we can continue. Now that we have a beginning and an end and we have that set up, now we can start deciding more terrain. Okay, and so what I'll do is I'll start throwing in some of the biome stuff, like a forest, a lake, a river. There's an ocean right there, so maybe to portray that this is a valley, maybe I want to put a river in there. So it's up to you which way you want to do it. Let's start with forest. I think first is a good idea. So we'll go in, and because this is towards the background where the stamps are smaller, it might be better to use Fantasy World trees instead of Fantasy Regional. So I kind of don't care much for these ones here. I think this will work better to use these ones instead. And we set this scale to 180. We can check this to see what this is at 180. I think that looks pretty good. And this is also kind of nice because you might want to hide some mistakes. Like you'll notice that there's a wave right here, and I can just use this stamp to hide stuff. This is something that professionals do all the time. It's just kind of hiding inconsistencies. And it's okay to do that. And when I generally do more of that cleanup stuff towards the end because it can get really tedious. And I try not to do the tedious stuff in the beginning of the process because it is kind of off-putting. It's easy to get turned off in that process. So we'll do this way instead. So I picked my tree, I picked the size. And so what I'll do is I'll go in and I want to make sure that it's set to where I can put down multiple at once, so that works. So let's just create a little forest right here. And I don't want it too close to the castle. And there's a particular reason for that. It's because if you're a defender and you're wanting to defend this castle, you don't want a giant forest getting in the way of your vision, right? If an army is approaching to attack or do a siege, you want to be able to see them coming. So I'm not going to put the forest close up. It is a little high up, so in the higher towers you can see over the forest that is off in the distance a little bit. So we'll add some on this side as well. So some little happy little trees here. And the way that I do forests in Fantasy World is I usually just make a bunch of clusters first, and they're going to be pretty big clusters. Let's even put some right here as well, along here. And then maybe we can actually just put a village down there. I think that would work better. Let's put a couple more here. So you start with these large globs first, and then you'll just start putting random clusters of 2 or 3, like this. This is going to create a little transition between these big globs and these smaller globs. All right, and then I'll just put one at a time. One. This is going to create this kind of nice transition so that way it looks a little more realistic. Forests have variety. There's a lot going on with them, right? There's not a particular formula, right? And then I want to also, reality is more diverse, right? It's not all the same type of tree. So you might want to go in and use different types of trees. So maybe we can put in some of these taller trees right here. Now I don't really care for the autumn color, so we can just go change the hue to make them green and then just throw them right in there. So we have some nice taller trees here. Put them in the center. I think that's a good place to kind of put them in the center of the forest here. Some center here, some here. And then the next step is you might want to throw in even more variation by putting in some bushes. So you type in bush, and you have these nice little bushes here. Let's use these ones. These are a little big. Let's take a look. This one looks a little better. Smaller. There you go. Okay. And then just place these little bushes around kind of the outskirts of the clusters. Right now I'm using a mouse for this, just so you know. I don't usually use a pen until I'm using like a shape tool or I'm painting. So if you do have a pen at home, I totally recommend you use it. But the beautiful thing is I only use them for certain tasks. So you're not going to be switching between pen and mouse a lot. I think that's kind of the beauty of this tool, is that there's only really specific actions within the tool in which I find the pen to be useful. It's, like I said, it's mostly just like painting, creating these roads right here that with the path tool, creating these hills right here. The path tool or the line tool just works great for that. Okay, we're at 152 changes. Let's go ahead and save it, and then we'll kind of move on to the next step. We've kind of delved into the scale that we want for the background. And obviously, the further back we go, it'll get even smaller. So it's always good to be cognizant about the scale, because the closer you get, you start running out of size to work with, because the max is 500. So since we've kind of set the scale for that background, the last bit of hills in the background, let's maybe move a little bit forward and set the scale for stuff that's closer to us. Some great things to kind of add is like a little bit of a village, I think, in the foreground. And you know, a lot of adventures can start in a village, a tavern in a village. And so we'll use a village at the start of the path or somewhere around the start of the path. I think that'd be a good idea. So let's just go through here. I think these right here, this human village looks great, but we'll use this instead. We're going to make it kind of big. I think we'll max out at the largest scale right here. So 500 will be the scale for stamps with Fantasy World here. And I'm going to put this, let's see here. I think over here should look good. Where's the most... When I decide where to put things, there's a kind of a method that I use, and it's usually hills. The more elevated a position or a structure is in the landscape, the more defensible it is. And so you kind of have a natural advantage to defense. So that's why I've kind of used these rolling hills as well. Not also do they look good as terrain, but you're also going to be using to determine what stamps are going to go where. So this village is kind of on a hill. It gives it a little bit of some height for defensibility, and it's close right next to the road here. I'm going to use 500 for here. And then I think every stamp after that will have to be fantasy regional, because again, once you start going above that, you'll notice that the line work starts to get really thick and it kind of doesn't look right. So I definitely recommend that you set the scale for some of the smallest stamps and then moving up to the biggest stamps. So we'll put a little village here. I think that looks good. And what you would expect from a village as well, we can throw in maybe some singular ones as well. We'll put these closer to the road here. I think that looks nice there. Put that there. And then from there, I also want to throw in some crops. Now, when it comes to the crops, I think a lot of them are isometric. I don't think any of them are side view, but it's okay to have some isometric. Like I said, it can sometimes look nice when you add them in. So let's go ahead and just throw in maybe some crops. I'm going to turn off random and just kind of create a 4. And then let's maybe put another one over on this side, just kind of make it look like it's overlapping. There we go. Now I can move it over to here, put it right here on this side. I can move it over to here if I want. You can put it anywhere that you like. And then we'll end up blending all these stamps. Let's just go ahead and move this. I'm going to put it nice and neatly into there. Excuse me, I think that looks nice. Okay, there we go. Some crops there, as you would expect. That looks good. Now let's go ahead and make the road part. So I'm going to select all these white stamps, or these white here, and I'm going to just do this. And now I want to pick a texture to be the road. I'll go ahead and use this. Make sure my softness is up and bring the opacity down. And you'll start with a smaller brush first. Remember, smaller brush. And we'll go ahead and just kind of place it right here. Let's set it to, is it the FG layer here? No, it's the BG layer. Let's bring the opacity up a little bit more. Let's go with 50. We're just going to create a little path with the brush. And we're going to make it bigger and wider the closer we get to it. So for now, just stick down your initial texture that you want to use. You might use multiple textures. Okay, now that that's done, I can kind of delete all these white lines. I don't need them anymore. So we'll remove those. Okay. And we're going to start by making this part of the road much bigger. This is a much larger part of the road, so we'll make this bigger. We're going to put our character standing right there. So we'll put that. Let's go ahead and bring the size down even more. So we got it even smaller. We'll bring it down even more. So it's even smaller. And even smaller. Oopsie. Let's go a little bit bigger than that. Okay. A little bit bigger. And then it finally kind of gets small. Yeah, so now you have that road there. So that looks good. And we can add more stuff as we go. Let's choose some characters that we might want to represent, like travelers kind of leading to that section. I'm also going to maneuver this a little bit more to the side here, because some of it's kind of going straight into the road, and I don't want that. There we go. Okay. Now we can go into the fantasy regional style. And we can pick our kind of characters. There should be some nice humanoids. There's a clergy character right here. I think this ought to look good. You have to do scale this up above 500, so just kind of know that. These are, at the full 500, they're this small. Those are a little too small. We want them to be a little bigger than that, and they're usually exaggerated to be a little bit bigger. So it's okay if they're exaggerated. If you're like, well, that's not to scale, don't worry about that. Medieval maps don't always sometimes go with perfect, with realism. They're kind of going with kind of stylized in a way. So it's okay if these characters are quite bigger than what the scale would be. That's not something that you need to worry about. So we'll put that there, and you'll notice that it's up a layer. So I want to push it down and make sure that the shadow is off. So we'll go ahead and put our character right here, and I'll probably build more of the road around them as well. And then I think I might also throw in like some flags as well. I want to do some overlapping. Remember I mentioned overlap? So let's go in and look for those flags. I think they're in here somewhere. Through, I didn't see them. I think they were banners. We'll just go through and try to find them here. Look at all this beautiful art. I hope you all have taken the time to really kind of play around with it. There they are right there. There's one right there. I like this one. This is a good color. We've already got blue for our ocean, so it wouldn't be bad to kind of add that in. We're going to put this on layer 4. Scale it up, and I want it to kind of overlap, so it kind of goes over the neat line. So you want to make sure it's above, like that, and this way it kind of overlaps, and then that way it kind of puts emphasis on that character, because you look at the flag that overlaps while everything doesn't, and then it will make you kind of focus on the character there. And normally I make a little scene right here, so I might throw in some, like a bag, or maybe throw in a mask, or throw in something that might show who they are, their profession. Like maybe you want to throw in a crate or barrel or something like this that kind of represent that maybe they're a merchant. So you could go ahead and put this little thing here. We'll make sure to put it down a layer. Put this at their feet. And then if I want, I can take some gold coins and then put them as well. So that way you know this is, so this could represent that, hey, maybe this city in the background right here is a very mercantile city. It gets a lot of its trade, a lot of its money and its wealth from trading on the high seas. That's why maybe this is like a port city. So behind that hill, you'd have like a port. And if you wanted to show that, you could maybe even use like some kind of port on the side here if you wanted to. So, but I think that this is kind of a way to put emphasis on what kind of city this might be, is this little character right here. Again, like I said, I'll throw in some coin. I believe that's in Fantasy Battle Map. We'll open that up. Let's see, where are we at for time? Oh, perfect. We're doing great for time. So we'll take this coin here, and I'm going to make sure that it's set to 0, and then I'm going to flatten it because I want the coins to look like they're flat on the ground. So then I'll go ahead and take this piece and then put those coins here. And I'm going to push them down a layer so that it's affected by the shadow as well. There we go. Okay. So we'll put some coins here. I'm going to turn off random rotation, and then I can just place a couple like this. And that way it's very clear that this is kind of a merchant of some kind. So we'll go ahead and take a step back and just see how that looks. And you can change this to anything that you want. You can add as many details as you want to that corner. But I think that will do well for now. We can add in more details and more stuff as we go. Now we've kind of set scale, the largest stamps to almost the smallest stamps here. Let's go ahead and do that now. We'll establish the smaller stamp. So we'll go ahead and use this green one here, and we'll end up changing the scale. But let's put a little island, and I don't want the island to be centered. I think I'll have the island be off to the side. So we already have this to this side. So to balance out that side, we'll put a little island over here. I think this will look good right here, little island. We're going to change the scale. We're going to flip and rotate it. And then we're going to use this green texture right here that I have. Put it to 100% opacity. And then this will be the little island. And then we'll put some fun stuff on here. And this will kind of represent probably some of the smallest of the stamps, because it's just so far in the background. And then we can also throw in some clouds. Maybe you want to throw in like a heavenly scene, whatever you want to add in there. It's pretty popular in a lot of medieval maps, is kind of throwing in like these heavenly features. But it doesn't have to be obviously a Christian god. It can totally be whatever gods are in your world. So now that we have that island there, we can now put a stamp on top of that. So we'll go back to Fantasy World. And I think I saw, like, we could put like a sunken city or something out on the island. We could put a fog bank around it to kind of represent that, you know, there's fog around it. And so sailors that, you know, venture too far, they end up crashing. So we can probably do that as well. Let's just put in the stamps first. Remember, I want to use this one as a guide. So this structure is going to be way further back than this structure. So I'm probably going to want to scale it down quite a bit. I think that size will work fine. And then we're going to put this right here on the ocean. Right here like this. We'll put it on layer +5 there. Put it right there. And then we can put some stuff on top of that, like maybe some trees or a ruin or whatever it might be. Maybe the world tree would go there. It's up to you. Yggdrasil. So we can take a tree and we can put a big tree right here. And you can scale this up because it's the world tree. So don't be afraid to scale it up. You really want to show the grandeur of the tree. So having it nice and big would be kind of nice. And then we can kind of put some clouds around that. Let me just take a step back and take a look at it. It's always good to stop what you're working on and then try to zoom out a little bit, and then you can kind of get a bigger picture. It's always good to step back because you can get lost in a little corner that you're working on. Like you could be working on this, and then what happens is you kind of realized, oh, well, I didn't take a step back. And then what ended up happening is that your stamps kind of went out of scale a little bit. There's a scale differential that looks off. And so it's always good to step back to make sure that you're not working on something and you're doing it wrong, especially with this style, with the perspective, that the forced perspective that we're doing here, because you can easily get lost working on a section. You totally forgot what scale you're working with, and then you have to go in and meticulously select all those stamps, rescale them. So kind of a pro tip, always take a step back. That way you can take a look at what you're working on and make sure that there's a sense of coherence with the whole piece. Okay, so just kind of remember that. I'll go ahead and make my save, and then we'll kind of continue filling in more and more of the space here. And we're going to want to choose what things that we want in that middle ground, what things we want in the foreground as well. So let's go ahead and move back or move forward towards the foreground. And maybe we want to put a banner down. And I'm going to have that banner kind of, I'm going to have it overlap. So I'll put this on layer 4. And I like this particular one because it fits well in a corner. You notice that it has that nice finesse, those little twirls of the banner going up. And so I think that looks good. And we'll have it overlap the neat line. I think that will look kind of nice. So now that you have that there, that's fine. We'll get to that. And then if you want to show like a bigger tree, then again, you want to go with Fantasy Regional. So I'll just type in tree. Because you notice how big that character is, you're probably going to want something similar to do with the tree as well. So we'll go ahead and pick a tree of a choice. We can choose a pine, we can choose a deciduous. It's up to you. We're going to push it down to layer 3 so that the shadow is below. And we might want to even scale it up even more. And we can kind of put a little tree right here. We'll scale it up even more. And then we'll put in another tree right here. And I'm going to push this thing down. And I've noticed that these right here are probably up too many layers. So we'll push those down. There we go. That works better. And then we have some trees here. And I think the dark of the tree is dark enough to where it contrasts with the banner. And I want to do a little bit of overlap. You notice that some of this tree is kind of overlapping some of that village there. That overlap is super important. So now that we kind of have that settled, then we can maybe throw in some stumps. So we'll go down a layer. Let's put a stump here, a stump there, and I'll make them a little bit smaller the further back I go. So we'll put another one over here, make it a little bit smaller. Put a small one over here. Let's rotate it to kind of give it the sense of that it's on a hill. Okay, let's go and put another one over here. I think should look good. There we go. Because I have some trees here, it kind of makes sense to have a stump as well, right? These are the trees that were cut. But not a bad idea. There we go. Just make sure that it's, again, you don't want it to be overlapping the neat line. You want complete control over what's going to be covering the neat line. And this one, I think I'm going to have overlap the road right here. So that always looks nice. I've said this so many times, even in my more general streams. Overlap is so important. It's how you kind of create a lot of that depth. Oh, good one. I'm stumped. Yeah, me too. Okay, so we've kind of done some of the front. Let's kind of move back into the background a little bit more. So let's go do that. All right, so let's go in this middle ground and kind of choose some things. I notice that the road goes right to this hill right here. That's great. So let's put a structure there. What goes well on hills? Towers, villages, whatever it might be. We've already got a village right there. So let's do a ruin. I think ruins are a great contrast. They stick out because so far everything on the map is kind of in good working condition. So as soon as you throw down a ruin, it immediately pops out because it's not in good working condition. It's fallen apart. So that ruin is going to pop out because of that. And I think on top of this hill looks great. And it's also a location that your players might want to go to. And that road leads right to that ruin. So that's perfect. So we'll go with that. And I think I'll throw in some other ruins as well. There's a little tower right here. So we can maybe throw in a tower. Could throw that in somewhere. Let's see here. We could put a tower here, or we could put a tower right here. It's up to you. Let's see here. No, I think that looks fine right there. We'll kind of leave that there. But I kind of noticed that the far left and right sides are kind of bare. So let's go put something on them. Let's put in a forest, and then let's put in, make the forest guardian of the forest be a unicorn. Something I see a lot in medieval maps is they put a lot of like creatures and characters on them. So if we take maybe this unicorn right here, we're going to have them be the protector of a forest. So what we'll do is we'll put some trees around this unicorn, and it's okay if the unicorn is blown up and large. We're stylizing it on purpose. You see this a lot in medieval maps. Some of the creatures will be large because they're trying to put emphasis on that creature. So we're going to surround this unicorn with forest, and it's going to act as kind of the guardian of the forest. So we'll put that there, and then we'll choose a tree that we want. Let's go with this one right here. Well, let's go with this one. Let's go with that. And let me take a look for scale here. You can look at stamps for scale. I think this is almost double, so I think that works good. So let's go ahead and place these down. So first I'm going to put this down a layer so that there's some trees behind them. Like this. And what I'll do is I'll leave the ground where they're standing empty. Like this. So we'll put them in here. Like that. Put a little bit in here, a little bit here. Oop, looks like I'll have to push this down a couple layers as well. My mistake. There we go. Usually you want your terrain to be in the lower layers so that way you can overlap them easier. Okay, so we'll continue with adding in this nice forest. And of course, like I said before, I'll be adding in more. I'll be adding in different variety as well. So we'll have here. So you have this nice forest. Let's bring the scale up even more because the hill is, this hill is closer up. So let's go ahead and bring that up. A little bit bigger. Let's go with about that scale right there. Should be fine. There we go. Now it looks like these trees are closer to us. And then we can go in, and then I can take these trees right here and scale them down to kind of show that they're further off in the distance. There we go. Then I can go in, place these. There we go. Okay, so there's this nice forest here. And what we'll do is we'll go ahead and put in different variety. So we'll start in the back here. Let's go ahead and pick a different tree. I do kind of like the combination of those sequoias. So let's go throw those in there. And then we'll throw in other trees as well. So it's not just sequoia. So let's go throw in these sequoias as well. We'll kind of place them in, and they're real tall, so they overlap into the ocean, and I really like that. So we'll just throw in a couple there, and we'll bring the scale up. Bring a couple in here. Some in there, here, here. And I like to put them in the more denser part. So put some there, there we go. Okay, and then we'll throw in another tree type as well, just so that we're not all using the same type of tree. It's kind of nice to throw in something. And let's go with small ones like this here. And I'm just going to throw them randomly kind of here and there. And then we'll bring the scale up. There we go. Okay. So you've got this nice guardian of the forest here. And now I can start throwing in some texture as well. So maybe I want to throw in some ground there. So let's go ahead and put like maybe a light dirt color right here. Bring the softness up, bring the down. And then we'll go ahead and just make this kind of brown in here because it's been tread on, right? It's a lot of dirt. So we'll just make this kind of this darker brownish color here underneath to kind of show this clearing, and it kind of shows off our unicorn. And I might want to show more overlap. So I might want to copy and paste one and then bring it up a layer. And that way it's kind of overlapping a little bit. There we go. And now it kind of gives it a better feel to it, I feel. There we go. Okay. So now that we have that put together, we're at 254 changes, so we should probably save. What are we looking at for time? We got about 14 minutes. We probably won't get it done in that much time, but we'll just keep going until we finish it. Okay. After the save, we'll kind of move on to the next step here. I kind of like that forest there. I think that works well. We'll probably want to build a road that kind of goes to that. So we'll end up taking this texture here. And then what we'll do is we'll kind of create the road. Let's see here. I think right here is a good little section. And so we'll kind of create the road that kind of goes into here. So what I'll do is I'll make some sections bigger than others. So we'll kind of continue making it a little bit bigger, and it gets smaller as it goes. There we go. So now that we have a road leading to that one, and then since we're doing some texturing here, let's also put a road that kind of leads to this village as well. So we'll put some in front of here. Let's put one here. There we go. And if you want, you can kind of put another piece right here. There we go. All right, looking good. Let's take a step back, right? Let's see how it looks. You always take a step back. Okay, so we've got the road leading to some of the important locations. Let's keep going. There's a lot of other stamps that you can kind of work with. There's other cities, there's castles, there's all kinds of stuff to use. So let's just keep going with that. All right, so we got some castles here. Why don't we use some of these ones here? There's a nice little castle right here. Let's put one right here, maybe in the background. We'll fill up this space. Make it a little bit bigger. Okay, there we go. And it kind of makes sense to put a castle next to a village because, you know, this is where the castle does its this is the castle where the villagers go to do their commerce. Maybe there's a market in the castle, whatever it might be. And then I've made sure that it's behind that character piece right there. So I think that looks kind of nice, and I think the scale is okay. It could probably be even bigger, a little bit bigger, but don't worry about making it perfect. Remember, one of the great things about this is it's stylized. And then we can go in and we can look up another village, and I'm going to put that at the base of this one down here. So we have a castle. It only makes sense to probably put a village in here as well. So we'll go ahead and put it on the side right here. I think right there looks okay. And then, of course, I always like to do a little bit of overlapping. So just put some trees like in front. I'll hide some of the line work on the side. Copy, paste, put another one here. I think that looks good. Let's overlap. Put a tree over there. Put a cluster over here. Just steal a couple trees and move them over to here. And then I'll probably put one tree right here too, just to give it a little bit more overlap. There we go. Okay, so now you have that. And then we can go in, of course, and then have a little road that leads to that section of it. So if you want, you can just put a little road that kind of leads right into that. There we go. And then let's add in some windmills. I think what we have here is we have a village and we have crops, but how exactly is the food processed? So maybe we want to throw in a nice little windmill up at the hill in the back right here, or you can put it over here somewhere, or over here is fine. I think right here should be just fine. That looks fine. And I'm going to take that stump and I'm going to put it right here where it kind of overlaps a little bit. And then I can take another stump and put it right here. We'll have an overlap. There we go. All right. Wherever those stumps are, maybe we want some dirt. So we'll go ahead and put a little bit of brown texturing underneath here. So we'll kind of blend them in better. And I'm going to put it all along the road as well to kind of highlight the road. Okay. And just, again, underneath wherever those stumps are. There we go. That looks good. Same thing here. Let's go ahead and put a little bit of texturing underneath that one. And I think I might make it a little white underneath here, just to kind of show that the road leads to this little section. Okay. And then we also want a road that's going to lead to here as well. So we'll have to make a road that kind of leads to this castle. It can be right here. We can put another tree right here. There you go. Let's take a step back. Yeah, looks good so far. We'll go ahead and save it. 175 changes. I hope that you guys are finding this helpful. I really, really like medieval maps there. I think they're perfect for fantasy, considering that's where fantasy gets a lot of its inspiration from, is from medieval and feudal times, feudal periods. So it only makes sense to kind of make maps in this style. They go really well, and you can always throw in fantasy elements to make them more interesting for your D&D or whatever campaign that your system that you're using. So it's always nice to do that. Okay, let's continue with adding in villages. I would kind of expect more towns. It's usually not just going to be one town. There's going to be a couple. So let's go ahead and put in another village. And a good place to put them, you can put one right here. Remember, you want to zoom in a little bit. There's one here. We can put one here. Let's put one overlapping the road. Let me take a step back here. Let me see. I'm going to look for the spaces that are the most kind of negative. You'll notice right here that I have some negative space here and that I have some negative space here. So we want to be able to fix that. So what I've kind of noticing is that I haven't created any landscape that is going to be compatible with the village. So what I'll do is I'll just add in another hill. So I'll just create my own. Put one right here. I think that looks good. And then we can put another one maybe kind of going in right here. I think that looks good. One more right here like that. Okay. That will kind of clear that space up, and it will allow me to put my village, boom, right there on top of that hill. So that will work out just fine. And make sure that we have to scale it up so it's bigger. There we go. All right, so we have another village there. And as always, I like to overlap. So I'll make sure that I have some trees kind of overlapping. And I'm pulling these trees from over here because they're within the general vicinity. So they're probably going to be around this scale. So I'll place them in here, and we can throw in one large tree just for fun over here, maybe one over here, a cluster. And we'll put them higher up. So right there, that looks good. And one right there, I think. Not too close together. There we go. It's good. And then again, we'll kind of create a little path that kind of leads to it. So make sure I get the opacity right, the size right. And then we'll have the path kind of wiggling its way to here. And then now I have a path that I can start overlapping some trees with, just making them a little bit bigger. This is a little bit closer right here, so I can make them just a teeny bit bigger. Okay, let's take a step back. Remember, always take a step back to see where you're at. Okay, this looks good. Let's go ahead and throw in that another ruin, I think should be good. Where is that nice ruin at? Okay. Let's see here. Where did that ruin go? Is it that one? No, that's got perspective to it. I want one that doesn't have perspective to it. Maybe it's further up. Let's type it in ruin here. There we go. Ah, that's it. We'll put this one right here. I'm going to make it a little bit smaller. That can go in that corner there. I think that looks good. Okay. And then what we could do is you could have like an army maybe marching down the road, kind of going towards the castle for a siege, or maybe they're walking in a distance, whatever it might be. So let's go throw that in. I think that'll be a nice little addition there, throwing in an army. And then we'll throw in the last little bit of details, okay? So we'll go to Fantasy Regional, and we're going to kind of create this army that's marching towards the city. So we'll start with this guy, and it's okay if the characters are bigger. You see how this is really big in comparison? That's okay if they're big. That's okay that they're big, because you want them to stick out. You want them to be recognizable. If it was this small, you'd have to zoom in to kind of see them. So I think it's okay to scale up. You'll see this a lot, again, in medieval maps where they're stylized. So it's okay if you see that they're kind of large. That's okay. No big deal. All right, let's go ahead and have a path that's kind of leading to here. And I'm going to have the army maybe kind of on this road, kind of marching towards. So what I could do is kind of maybe put this one here. We can put another one in there right here. And then we can throw in some soldiers that don't have. All right, so we'll go ahead and rotate here. Oopsie. I don't want to have them set to random rotation. I want them all to be facing the same way. So I'm just going to go ahead and place these onto here. There we go. So now you kind of have this army that's kind of moving. Now you could make them bigger. You could move them inward. Do whatever you want. It's up to you. I can move these trees so that way it kind of looks like they're kind of moving in on it there. And I'll just select all these little guys right here. We'll kind of move them inward here. I'm just going to rotate them so that it kind of looks like they're going on an incline a little bit. I think that looks kind of nice. And then we'll throw in a couple more right here. There we go. And then we can throw in maybe some kind of commander. Let's see here. I think one with a spear. Let's go with this character instead. There we go. So it kind of looks like they're going over a hill, and they're kind of making their way towards the village or towards a city, whatever it might be. So that kind of fills up that spot. Now, I think from here, we can just start throwing in some terrain stuff. We could throw in a river. We could throw in a lake. It's up to you. With the lake, you could just use the brush here, 100% opacity, turn the softness off, and then you can just like create a little lake. So I'll show you how to do this. We'll go in and we're just going to paint in the lake. There's the lake. And then, of course, as always, you're going to take some trees to kind of overlap. And then that will create kind of like a forested shoreline. So always remember to kind of overlap a little bit. And then we'll bring the smaller scale down. There we go. So it kind of looks like there's a little bit of a lake there. So I think that kind of looks nice. I'm going to go ahead and save it 109 changes. I hope you guys are getting the kind of a general idea on how to kind of make these, right? You always start with the terrain, start with the neat line, which is the shape tool. Then you're going to go ahead and build on the terrain. And then from there, you'll want to set scales for each section. So you're kind of getting the general idea of it. We'll go until we finish. So let's go ahead and continue. Let's throw some stuff in the ocean. So you might want to use some ships. And so there's some nice ships here. You can use these. I'm going to put them up a layer. And remember to bring the scale down. So the biggest ship would be on this wave that's closest to us. And then if there's another ship, you can scale it down again. And then you can put another ship and then scale it down even more. So you get the general idea on how to kind of put these together. You want to use scale to kind of show the difference. You see the difference here. Some small ones, big ones, little ones. Let's put one over here instead. I think that'd be a good place to put it. And let's take these and bring these down a layer. We'll put that there. That looks better there. There we go. And then I mentioned clouds. So that island right there is maybe shrouded in clouds. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to completely desaturate and bring the brightness up. And this is going to act as like fog. And so what I'll do is I'll kind of encase the island a little bit in fog. There we go. And let's push these down a layer. I also want some to be behind the tree as well. Remember, the overlap is the trick. And to make it look like that's more in the distance, I'll bring the brightness down just a little bit more. There we go. And I can go in. Let's flip this. I can go that way. There we go. And you're kind of getting the general idea. There's just like this mist that's kind of covering the island. So we'll bring the brightness up. There we go. Okay, so there's some mist around that island. And then you notice that we're kind of, there's this flat green texture. And so it's great to kind of use a texture that has a lot of artifacts in it. So you notice this grass too right here has some really nice artifacts. You can use that, and you can always use the contrast option to boost up more of it to bring the artifacts out more. And so if I want, then I can go in and then kind of just do this to bring in some more artifacts to kind of give it more character. Because right now you have this very flat kind of green like texture, and it's not really doing much. And so by just taking one of these grass textures and boosting the contrast so that the artifacts are really, really popping out, then it gives it a little bit more, again, just kind of gives it a little bit more texture to it. It's a little bit less work for you when you kind of do it that way. So now it doesn't look like that flat green we had before. So that's kind of very helpful to do that. Okay, let's keep going here. We're going to finish up the last bit of stuff here. We're going to finish up the background, and then we'll add in some final little details, little tiny bushes, grasses, stuff like that. We'll add that in to fill in the rest of the negative space. But I always say don't fill in everything to where there's no negative space. Always leave a little bit of negative space, because what that does is it's going to give a rest for your viewer's eyes. Because if everything's so busy, then that means nothing is focused on. Everything is so busy. So when there's negative space, it gives the viewer's eyes a rest, and then they can go back to the busy spaces and then occupy those and kind of try to decode that. So always nice to remember, leave some negative space so that that way it doesn't always confuse the eye. You don't want your viewer's eyes to get discombobulated. So I'm going to go ahead and throw in some yellow underneath here because the crops are there. So I'll make that yellow. I'm blending that in. I might even throw in a little bit of yellow over here. I think that looks fine. Okay, let's go ahead and throw in some stuff in the sky. So we want to show clouds. So what I'll do is I'll make these real big and I'll flip them and I'll bring them down a layer. So that way you can only see them up here. They're not kind of with the neat line, so they're underneath. We'll put some there, here, and I'm flipping them upside down because the flatter side, if you place them down, they just kind of look flat. But you'll notice that the bulges are at the top of it, so I flip it, and then you'll get much better results going like that. So we'll go ahead and throw that one in there, that one in there. I think there we go. There are some clouds there, and let's also throw in a sun. I like the suns with the characters. Those were kind of nice. And what I'll do is I'll have this one go outside of the neat line so that it kind of pops out. I think that looks kind of nice. And then I don't think a cloud can be behind the sun. So I will have to move these clouds to where they're not in contact with the sun. There we go. And then you have a nice overlap there. And I think that kind of looks nice. And you know, if you're having a hard time with negative space, it's just that as you start to fill it up, just leave some of the spaces negative. So you notice that I have some negative spaces right here. I probably won't add much there except for some grass, some bushes. Same thing here. There's negative space in here. There's negative space in here. I'm going to leave those spaces negative, and it's okay to do that. Let's go ahead and put in some grass, put in some bushes, put in some stuff like that. So we'll start with larger stuff first. We'll put in bushes. And we've already got some bushes in here, right here. So let's just select those. And remember, they're going to get bigger, they get closer to you. So we'll throw in some clusters. And what's really nice with bushes is that you can put them along a road to make it look like they're kind of framing the road. And so they can be a great way to kind of show that there's, I guess, a framing like thing that happens. And I kind of like doing that because, you know, the road is being tread on, right? But the bushes outside of the road are not going to get tread upon. So it only makes sense to have them on the edge of the road where they're not going to get tread on by carriages, palanquins, travelers, carts, steeds, your mounts, whatever it might be. So throwing in the bushes is a great little thing to kind of throw in, and it can act as a way of framing like a crop or a field as well. Kind of nice to throw in some bushes. I think it's just a nice thing to add in. The trick is just don't make a perfect line like this. Don't do that. What you do is you might cluster 2 or 3 together and then put them to the side. So don't end up making like this straight line like this. That just looks odd. It looks too, I don't know, methodical. You don't want that. Have the bushes kind of be a little bit more on the random side of things. It looks a little better. So I'll go ahead and throw in these bushes. Those are a little big. Let's make them a bit smaller. There we go. So kind of a nice little trick. This is where I do use a pen instead of a mouse. So this is kind of a nice little trick that you can do. All right. Now the other thing you can do is there's also a great grass texture. I think, is it in this style? Grass, right here, perfect. This stuff is great. I really like this. So we'll bring the scale up a little bit. Big first, we'll start at the front. And so you can take this grass and it just does wonders. You see, it throws in this grassy like texture. And I think that just looks great. It fills in negative space, but it's not so heavily filled with artifacts to where it's confusing, right? So it'll still make the negative space somewhat negative because it's just grass. It's not a massive artifacts that kind of get in the way. Let's go ahead and bring the opacity all the way up. There we go. So you get this nice grass texture, and wherever there's negative space, that's where you fill that in. Okay, there we go. And then I'll have to change the strokes. I'll have to change the size to be smaller the further back I go. For right now, I think this works. Let's go down even more, 210. Smaller. Throw it in. No, it just adds in a nice grass texture. Let's go down even more. There we go. So now you have that nice grass texture in there, and it kind of fills in the negative space. You see how it kind of filled in that negative space. So that works out really, really well. Yes, works great on battle maps as well, what the musical rogue said. Absolutely. Okay, we'll let this save. We'll go ahead and throw on just a couple more elements, and then we'll call it good. Now, this style is pretty easy to make. It's just that once you have to master the perspective part, and the trick to that is just scale, right? So things closest to us, bigger, things further back, smaller. You don't have to segment it into 3 sections. I just do that because I think it looks nice. So those are the kind of things that you can kind of do. Let's go ahead and just take a step back here. Now, I think we're good for now. I think you get the general idea on how I put things together. The next thing is to label things. And there are a couple ways that you can go about, excuse me, labeling things. You can use banners. But if you've put a lot of effort into the landscape, into the art of it, then banners can kind of cover up stuff. So banners might be too much. You might want to consider only doing a banner maybe on the central piece, right? Maybe you want to put a banner here on top of this thing, and then everything else doesn't have a banner, right? It's up to you, you know? I mean, I would only use the banner for the most important things on the map. You notice the only banner on here so far, besides that one up top, is right here, and that's for the title of the map. But you could also just go with straight text. as well. But when you do text, my recommendation is that you do have a outline so that way it pops out a little bit. So you can bring out the outline a little bit. I mean, with just plain white, it would work, but you like to label things. So I'm just going to call this Guardian or Warden of the Wood. Of the Wood. We'll set it to bold. So this right here is the Warden of the Wood. And then I'll have this be the World Tree. And when it comes to text, I try not to cover up like what I'm trying to label. So I wouldn't put the text on top of the unicorn. I put it near the unicorn or near the tree. Now it's okay if it overlaps it a little bit. I do feel like it's okay if it's just a little. Just make sure it's not too much, right? So notice how the E is only covering up some of it and not all of it. Just kind of keep that in mind. And then we'll have to label everything. So we can call this Castle Fordland. Just going to randomly come up with names, so nothing special. We'll call this Hager's Heap. We'll call this Dunmere Village. We'll call this Ruined Tower. I'm not being very creative with the names. I know. Okay. And then let's see here. We've got those. Let's label this village. Saddlestock. Saddlestock. Let's go. Stock Village. And then we'll put Castle Sea Foam over here. Bastel. Bastel. Yes, it's a Bastel, folks. Okay. Castle Sea Foam. They're not the best names, but I just want you to see that you can label them. The style that I use is I usually use these. Again, I only use the banner if I'm trying to label the thing itself, because again, you don't want to hide all this art. We took all this time to put all this stuff together. It looks a little odd when you when you cover them up. So we'll go ahead and finish up the last bits here. And we're going to call it good. Just want to make this road part right here because she's standing on the road there. There we go. Okay. All right, sweet. So I think this looks good. Now let's go real quick into filters. So the filters that I like to use are, one is kind of this old leather. And I'll bring the overlay way down. And it's on layer 5. So it's going to add some leather like feel to it. And then I might also want to add maybe a faded as well. That will kind of give it like the map is older, have a faded look. So we'll kind of build the faded feel up a little bit. There we go. And then what filters also do is it kind of makes sure that all the art kind of is cohesive, comes together, right? So the old leather added the artifacts on top of everything, including the fantasy regional art, which is quite different from the fantasy world art. Filters kind of force the stamps to kind of all work together because it's adding additional filters, textures, whatever on top of it. So it's always nice to use filters to kind of create more continuity, to make the stamps kind of all work together. Old leather is a great one, and faded. Now let me turn those textures off so that you can kind of see the difference. You notice how it kind of is a little bit more brighter. It kind of looks like it's a newer map. But when you add the faded and the old leather, it gives it this old kind of wrinkled, stained feel to it. And that works really well from what I would kind of consider from a medieval map. I want to show that some time has passed, that it looks old. So those are kind of the textures, this filters that I use. You could also use a color filter if you wanted to like throw on like a dominant kind of a color. You could do cold, warm, parchment to give it a red feel, blue for overcast, darker blue for night scene, red to pull that out, winter blue. Maybe you want to have it black and white. You want to have it set to grayscale, sepia. Maybe you prefer it to have this yellow washed out look. So those are the kind of things that you can kind of do to kind of make the map better. So using filters is always a must. If you especially when you're stepping outside of the box, because you'll notice that all the stamps from Fantasy Battle Maps are all made in the same style, and so they blend well together. But since we're using Fantasy Regional and Fantasy World stamps, the stamps are different. So again, filters will make sure that that art blends together with the different styles, because that's what this is. This is a master class, right? And in master classes, we like to go outside of the box here. All right, well, hey, that ends the stream. I hope you guys get the general idea on how to kind of make medieval maps that are like this. This probably won't be the last medieval map masterclass that we'll do. There's tons of different types of medieval maps out there that you can draw inspiration from. So what we'll do is we'll probably in the future have another medieval map too, where we'll make a different type of map that doesn't follow this style. So I'll probably do the research. And of course, you can also leave requests for streams. So go definitely check out stream requests in the Discord. You're going to find stream request channel. Go there. If there's a particular type of medieval map style that you like more than others that you want to be able to replicate with the tool, let me know and we'll set that up. Okay. All right. So thank you so much, everyone. Had a really great time working on this. Guess what? We have a stream tomorrow as well. Because we just released this new Fantasy World stuff, we're totally going to be showing everyone how to create epically massive world maps. So we're going to be doing that tomorrow. In the first stream, it's going to be part 1. As you know, building a world is not a one stream setup. It's going to take multiple parts to do this. So in part 1, we're going to kind of put together like what kind of continents I want. I'm going to show you my methods on how to put together continents, how to use stencils, how to somewhat go over plate tectonics. I'm not going to go too much into the science of it because that's just more work. As a DM, I want to give myself less work, so we won't go deep into a scientific method of putting together, but we're going to kind of glean some things from science to kind of make it easier to make our world maps and everything. All right, hey, thanks so much. I'll see, hopefully, a lot of you tomorrow for our epic Fantasy World stream. All right, you guys are amazing. I'll see you all soon. Bye, everyone.